They were painting this magical picture that we all have in our minds of Italy. This was the Italy I saw on TV. Okay, of course, I have to do this. So I went ahead and was like, all right, let's do this. I'm going to Italy. The only thing that my 19, 20-year-old mind was not focusing on because of just the world in which I lived in at that time and the way I saw the world at that time was that the people I was getting my information from did not look like me. That the people who had this great time, who were telling me how awesome Italy was, were two white girls. And it never occurred to me to think, would my experience be any different?
This is the Maverick Show, where you'll meet today's most interesting location-independent entrepreneurs and world travelers, and learn the strategies and tactics they use to succeed. And now, here's your host, Matt Bowles.
Hey everybody, it's Matt Bowles. Welcome to the Maverick Show. My guest today is Nicole Phillip. She is a travel creator, social media strategist, and journalist who left corporate America to explore the world and help others do the same. Born in New York City to immigrant parents from Trinidad and St. Vincent, she grew up mostly in Orlando, Florida, and is now a world traveler with over 250,000 followers on social media. Through her content, she empowers Black travelers and people of color to navigate the globe safely and confidently. She's all about making travel accessible, authentic, and unfiltered, with a dash of wit and a healthy dose of humor. You can find her work in the New York Times, the Daily Beast, ABC News, and many other outlets. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You are so kind. That is such a nice bio. I might have to use that one for myself. I appreciate that.
I am so excited to have you here. As you know, I am such a fan of your content, and I am so excited for our conversation tonight. But before we get into that, let's just set the scene and talk about where we are recording from and the fact that we have agreed to make this a wine night. So let's also talk about what we are drinking. I am actually in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, on the east coast of the United States this evening. And I have opened a Spanish red wine. This is a Bobal, which Bobal is apparently one of the top 3 most grown grape varietals in Spain, but it is not nearly as popular or well known as other red wines in Spain. But somebody put me onto this, so I thought I would try it. So I've just opened that, and I'm going to be drinking through it during the episode this evening. But where are you, Nicole, and what are you drinking?
All right, so I am inside of my house in Orlando, Florida. I'm drinking Winking Owl Merlot.
Amazing. I want to give a shout out to your city. I feel like on this podcast, we give a reasonable amount of love to the state of Florida. I've had people on from Tallahassee. I've had people on from Duval. I've had people on from Miami who are from those places. I've interviewed a lot of alumni from FAMU. So I feel like Florida gets a decent amount of love, but I want to say you might be the first person I've interviewed that is from Orlando. So for people that do not know about Orlando beyond Disney World and conventions, can you share a little bit about your city? What would you put people onto?
So I would say that if anyone thought that Orlando was just Disney, you probably would have been right prior to maybe 5-6 years ago. A lot has changed. I used to think Orlando, oh, it's so boring. All we do is go to the mall, have that kind of small town feel, but so much has changed, particularly with the beginning of the pandemic. So, a lot of people started moving here from cool cities like Miami, New York City, and all that. And so we had to get cool here in Orlando. And I actually did leave, go to New York for about 8 years through college and stayed for a little bit and came back. But yeah, when I came back, I was like, wow, this is a completely different Orlando. In 2023, it was voted best foodie city in the United States. There are a lot of food options. You might not think of Orlando for food, but there are a lot of great food options, from Michelin star type restaurants to the hole in the walls. And so I think that's why it might have gotten that rating. There's also a lot of nature-y things and stuff like that to do outside of Disney, even though the parks are great too.
Well, let's go a little bit into your background now. You mentioned New York City. I know that's a big part of your story, including your origin story, where you were born. So can you share a little bit, maybe just taking it back even a step further, and share a little bit about your parents' story, where they're from, and their experience immigrating to New York?
Yeah, so I'm a first generation American. My mother came here in the mid 70s, I believe, and she had her first child in 1978. The way my mother came here, her mother first came. And so her mother worked very hard on her own to start bringing over her 3 children and her husband as well. And so while my mother was here, she did have several kids, including myself, my sister, 2 brothers, who unfortunately passed away, I should say that, but now it's me and my sister. And I was born in the 90s to my mother, who is from Trinidad, and my father, who is from St. Vincent. I grew up mostly with my mother, so she raised me in a very religious household. You asked me earlier when we were preparing for this, do I feel very connected to my Caribbean identity? Was I raised, very Caribbean? The thing is, I feel very connected to my American identity, mostly because when my mother had me, she was done with the whining and the partying, and I got the religious, serve the Lord, like, changed your ways, Mom. My sister used to tell me, she was like, when I was 8 years old, I was making screwdrivers for people at the party. Because my sister's 15 years older than me. So she had a completely different mom. So my mom was more like that Brooklyn backyard Caribbean party that's going to Florida, more of that type of person. And I got the very religious, you can't watch Harry Potter, you can't watch The Simpsons, more, I wouldn't say to the point of religious trauma type of mother, but just a lot more strict. You're going to church on Sundays, Sunday school, we go to Wednesday service, that type of woman. So she was more focused on the, I guess, religious aspect of the culture and not a lot of anything else. So I never knew how to dance. Unfortunately, people used to make fun of me for not being able to dance. I had to teach myself. I knew nothing about the music. I knew nothing about like dance hall, anything, because my mom was blasting gospel. She was not blasting Buju Banton. She wasn't blasting anything like that. So yes, I had to really teach myself to learn a lot about that. Those are aspects of Caribbean culture that are really just part of our melting pot of culture here in the United States. So there are probably generational Americans who grew up in Crown Heights or Flatbush who know more about the Caribbean than I do, or like grew up much more Caribbean than I did, to be honest. So I had to learn a lot more about that to just be on the up and up. So that was the main focus. Now, I grew up a curry everything. So there was parts of the Trinidadian influence in there. There was still a lot of the roti, all that. Like I still got a lot of that, but a lot of things that make people feel very connected to a Caribbean identity for me was kind of replaced with the Christian identity. And I'm thankful for it because today I am still a woman of faith. It led me in the direction that I wanted to be in to become the person I am today. I'm good with it. I watch Harry Potter though. She couldn't take that from me. I started doing my own thing.
I was going to ask, how did you eventually find Buju Banton and other Jamaican dance hall artists and so forth? Like, how did that start to become part of your life?
So one day I was like 11 years old and like I was with a bunch of other kids. We were all dancing or trying to dance, and everyone made fun of me because I could not whine. I could not dance. First of all, I was 11. I didn't need to be knowing how to whine, nothing. But still, like all the kids knew how to dance and I didn't. And then it was like, that was my villain origin story. Like from there, I was like, I gotta learn how to dance. I gotta start listening to the music. So I think probably around middle school time, I started listening to LimeWire and stuff, listening to like Beanie Man and stuff like that, and really getting into the music and then teaching myself how to dance. And then other non-religious aspects of just popular culture, not specific to the Caribbean. I just always was a very, I'm gonna do what I want type of person. And that was just always my childhood. I was very type A, whatever. So like my mom's like, don't watch Harry Potter. I'm gonna watch Harry Potter. I'll watch all the Harry Potters there were to be seen. And I told her, I also wasn't a liar. But I did what I wanted to do, not to say, oh, I rebelled and stuff like that, because I don't really think that's what it was. I think I was just becoming my own person. And then I was able to find God for myself and have my own relationship. And then I was like, I don't have to do things your way. I can do things my way.
And how did your interest in travel start to develop when you think back? What types of travel experiences did you have as a kid?
My interest in travel did not start until I had the absolute worst travel experience that I've ever had in my life. And I know that that's ironic, and you already know what that experience is, so I know we're going to get to it. But that's when my interest in travel really started. I should say, I came from humble beginnings, as they say. We didn't have a lot of money. We weren't poor, I guess. Even though there were some times where I'm like, I don't know how my mama did it. Like, I'm like, I didn't feel poor, but then like when she tells me the stories, I'm like, we were po. Like, that joke, we couldn't even afford the other letters. We were po. Like, I'm like, oh, wow. So we didn't grow up with much money, but my mother did what she could because her thing was, and this is a very Caribbean thought process, she said, I never want a man to make style on you. And what that means is I never want a man to feel like he's the one who introduced you to a good life, to travel, to things like that. So she did what she could with what little she had to make sure that we went to nice restaurants. Now, nice for the amount of money we had, it's probably like Carrabba's, but it was something. Teach me how to eat properly, have experiences. So when we could travel, we went on cruises. It's a little bit more of an affordable way to travel. And we're already in Florida, and we'd go to the Caribbean, mostly Mexico, like that. And so those are my first travel experiences.
Can you talk about how old you were when you moved from New York to Orlando, and then your choice to go from Orlando back to New York for college?
So I was about 4 years old when we moved to Orlando. So Orlando's a lot of what I know. We would go back and forth to New York. So I wasn't only ever in Orlando and never saw New York again, because I still have family there to this day. So I did go back and forth. But when it came time to go to college, I really wanted to go back to New York. I just felt compelled to go to New York. And so I applied to NYU and I got in. Now, I let other people convince me to not go because it was expensive. I had a lot of conversations and people were like, why wouldn't you just stay in Orlando? Just do that. I had a full scholarship, or at least in some way it was like fully paid for me to go to UCF, the University of Central Florida. So I went to UCF actually for a year. So now I'm at UCF for a year, and it felt like the 13th grade because I was raised here. So I'm seeing the same people from elementary school, middle school, high school, and now I'm here. And then also, mind you, where my family home is, I can hear the drums and the music from UCF during their games. That's how close I lived to UCF all my life. And then I went to UCF. And it was still a true, I guess, college experience in that you have a campus, going to college parties, meeting people. But I just felt like I was meant for, this is going to sound so corny. Felt like I was meant for something more. I hate that those words came out of my mouth. But I felt like I was meant for something more. And I had went to school for journalism. And I just felt like, what am I supposed to do? Like graduate from UCF and then go work for like the Weather Channel or like Golf Channel, whatever they have here. What am I supposed to do with a degree from journalism at UCF? So I said, fuck it. I'm going to go to NYU. I applied to transfer. And then I went there to finish off my last 3 years of school.
And going back to New York as an adult on your own and living there independently in New York City, what was that experience like?
When I first got there, it was kind of like New York, concrete jungle legend. That's kind of like, wow, New York. And you're looking around and da-da-da-da-da. And everything's just so great and amazing and the lights. And then, you have to go through regular life. Now, my first year in New York was amazing because I lived in dorms and I was living in Manhattan and a 2-bedroom dorm. And I was staying in a room with 3 people because I was po, as we mentioned. So that's all I could afford. But I was in Manhattan. So I got to experience my first year of New York being in Manhattan in the NYU dorm. So that was really nice. But as I started to realize New York is great when you can afford New York, but I was really broke. And so what I would say New York did for me was there is no Nicole without New York. And I will say that because New York shaped me. New York opened my eyes to new cultures. Because back then, like I said, Orlando was very small towny. I didn't really know much beyond what was around me. I was very ignorant and didn't even realize. So New York really opened me up to seeing new cultures and having new tastes for different foods and different things, and just feeling like a more well-rounded person through living in New York. I will say that. I could not afford to love New York. I simply could not. I feel like if I just had money, it would have been just a much better experience for me. But there were a lot of things I wanted to do that I couldn't. I had to focus on paying my rent, which was always a pain. But New York did for me what it needed to do, with, as I said, shaping me as a person and teaching me how to climb a ladder, how to really stand out when it comes to the corporate world. I truly believe that had I not gone to NYU, I would not have had the opportunity to work at places like the New York Times or ABC News and all of that.
All right. So let's talk about your worst travel experience of all time, which you wrote an article about in the New York Times, which we will link up in the show notes so that folks can go and read the article. But just setting the scene for this experience, can you share a little bit about you're in college, You decide to study abroad. Can you talk about what went into that decision, what expectations you had and hopes you had for that experience, and then what it turned out to be like?
All right, so setting the scene. So a 19, 20-year-old freshman in New York. I'm staying in that room with two other roommates, and at least in that specific room, but within our whole dorm, there's like four of us. I was interested in studying abroad, but I just didn't know where. And I also thought maybe I couldn't afford it just because of my financial circumstances. Then I realized that studying abroad would actually be about the same cost for a semester as staying in New York. And in certain cases, it was actually cheaper for certain people, depending on where you were going. So I was looking into a couple different destinations. I think there was like a short-term program in Cartagena, but I wanted to do something long-term. And so I started hearing about Italy. You should go to Italy. NYU has a campus in Florence, Italy. So I talked to two of my roommates who did a program in Florence, Italy. So they did about 2 years there. And I asked them, how was it? They were like talking about the sandwich shop that's right around the corner from the school, and you have to go there. It's so great. All the fun that they had. I think one of them might have had a little lover or something in Italy. Yeah, just about the Nutella croissants that they loved. And it was just like they were painting this magical picture that we all have in our minds of Italy. This is the Italy I saw on TV. Okay, of course, I have to do this. So I went ahead and was like, all right, let's do this. I'm going to Italy. I'm going to use my refund. You know, you get that refund every semester. I'm going to use that to buy my flight and buy a couple sandwiches while I'm there. And I'm going to Italy. The only thing that my 19, 20-year-old mind was not focusing on because of just the world in which I lived in at that time and the way I saw the world at that time was that the people I was getting my information from did not look like me. That the people who had this great time, who were telling me how awesome Italy was, were two white girls. And it never occurred to me to think, would my experience be any different? So I have these expectations. And I remember we went to an orientation. And I remember one of the first things they told us is, you know, just so you know, Italians are bold. They're not super politically correct. So we're just letting you know. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what you, like, sure. Like, I didn't really think about what they mean by bold or politically incorrect or whatever. So I just moved on with my life. Now, even the kids on the campus were not very open and kind. I remember specifically seeing a girl with a Tri-Delta bag. And I was like, oh, are you Tri-Delta? Because I just remembered that. I remembered the symbol. And I was like, oh, this is like a way to spark conversation with somebody. I was like, oh, are you Tri-Delta? And it was just kind of like yeah. And then like, that was it. I did slowly start finding friends, but I just never felt fully comfortable there. And I couldn't really figure out why people weren't as open and nice, why people were kind of cold. And it was one day that everything just like the light switch went. If there was a light bulb moment in my life, it was when we did a fall break trip to Cinque Terre. And I was with a bunch of white girls and one black girl. And we were on a beach. There's this man who's standing on a flipped over boat. And the girls are talking to him, or he's trying to flirt with them. The white girls, he's trying to flirt with them. I guess he gets turned down. The girls, they were never really interested. So they kind of like write him off, whatever. He starts hurling insults. America's so gross, so nasty. I've been to Miami. Your place is so dirty. You guys don't know how to keep things, whatever. So he starts going off on them. And then at some point, the girls start going back at him and he starts saying some really insulting things. I've already tuned out. I've moved on, whatever. And then the one other black girl in our group goes up to him and she goes, hey, you do not talk to women that way. And now she's, you know, telling him like, that's not how you speak to women, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, I see that he grabs her and he's a decent sized man and she is tiny. Imagine the slimmest frame you can, and also in a tall body, model-esque body. And then imagine an average sized man of maybe 5'8", 5'10". His whole hand could wrap around her arm. He grabbed her and he starts jerking her around. And I'm there and I'm like, what the hell? And I'm looking around. There are so many people on this beach. Not a single person said a thing. There are so many white people on this beach. Not a single person said a thing. Then there are the girls that we came with. She's defending you. Why aren't you saying anything? Which is also like a common theme throughout much of the world and what we see in history of Black women speaking up and everyone else being quiet. So it was me. I go up now, and now I'm like, let her go. I'm going off on him. And then I punch him in his arm. And he finally lets her go. And I'm looking around and everyone's just looking at us. And I was like, y'all were going to let him beat her up. Y'all were going to let him beat both of us up. So I look around and I lock eyes with someone whom I believe to be a migrant from Africa because he's like selling items and they're draped on his body. He has a hat on. And he's just looking at me. And it was just like, I wish I could do something. Like the consequences for him just stepping in were worse than they would be for me because I'm an American citizen. They might think someone's going to be looking for me, different things. It was just a mutual understanding. Like, I'm sorry that's happening to you and I wish I could do something, but I can't. At least that's how that moment felt to me. Now, this girl is bruised. I believe she even had bruises on her fingers now that I'm thinking about it. And she was in so much pain. And we go back and we're talking to the girls in our group. We're talking to, I believe there was like 2 tour guides that either left us for the day and we were supposed to meet up with them, whatever. Nobody really had words to say. But there was just such a obvious lack of understanding from the other people in our group. And, they were young. So like maybe they just, they don't, maybe now, maybe in today's, because this was like maybe 12 years ago, maybe today, they would do something. Back then, maybe they didn't know, they didn't have the words. I don't know. So that was that moment where the rose-colored glasses came off and I saw the world for what it is. Like in that moment, not only did I see Italy for what it is, I saw the world for what it is. I had never knowingly experienced racism until that moment. I didn't notice it. I didn't register it. But then after that moment, when everything transpired, I started thinking back on things my mom would say to me, like when I'm in Walmart and I'm wearing a hoodie and she's like, take that hoodie off. You don't know how people are looking at you. And I'm starting to realize like there were certain things that were said to me or that now made me understand, oh, these are things I've been experiencing. Things like you talk like a white girl, you don't act Black. Little things like that I didn't realize were microaggressions or coming from a place of racism. Or things that were happening to me, like my mother saying people are looking at me a certain way as I'm wearing my hoodie in Walmart and I'm not even noticing. Maybe it's just like this, I don't know, is veil of innocence the proper word? Sometimes I'd be saying stuff and I'm like, is that right? I'm gonna look it up later. I'm just saying words. Innocence. There's innocence over me. That's probably not the right phrase. And American racism is also very much covert, which was the opposite of my experience when I got there. And then after that, there was just a series of moments that I understood to be wrong. I remember I was getting a caricature done in a city in Italy. And obviously caricatures are supposed to be like wild, whatever. But there was something about this particular caricature that even made my white friend uncomfortable. And it was because, first off, the guy just started calling me over. He didn't make me pay for it. He just was so fascinated, I guess, that he wanted to do a caricature for me. And as he's doing it, he just keeps saying, tomato, tomato, your lips are like a tomato. They're like just tomatoes. And he just draws this like really hyper-racialized, big-lipped caricature of me that even as I remember distinctly seeing my friend because she was, I guess, on the other side. And she's just like, oh my God. I remember her looking down, hand to face, like, I cannot believe this is happening to this girl. Like that. And here I am smiling like an idiot too for this caricature. I didn't realize what was happening. Embarrassing moments in life. So that was another moment. I remember also I'm walking down the street, broad daylight, blue skies, maybe 8 something in the morning heading to school. And shop owners are putting out their signs and whatever. And I'm walking behind a woman. I'm looking down at my phone. They're probably like maybe 2-3 feet between us. I'm looking down at my phone. I'm not paying any attention to her. And she stops abruptly. And so like, when someone stops abruptly, you end up on them a little bit. I wasn't on her, but I got closer to her. She turned around and screamed in my face. Mind you, I have my phone in my hand. I'm looking, like, I look completely not paying attention. I'm distracted. I'm just on my phone. She screams in my face. She jumps off the sidewalk. She continues to scream. She refuses to get back on the sidewalk until I pass her. And I'm looking around at all these shop owners. Again, broad daylight, 8 in the morning, busy street with stores. And I look like I was trying to rob this woman the way that she's screaming.
So you have this experience for your semester abroad, your first time living on your own outside of the country. And earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that it was this experience that actually got you interested in travel. So can you talk a little bit about how you processed this entire experience? Because I feel like for some people, it might be off-putting, and it might be, I, as a result of this, do not want to have more travel experiences. But for you, what was the impact of this experience, and how did that relate to your future travel trajectory?
I separated the people of the country from the country itself. There are reasons why people do love Italy. There are reasons why there are other Black travelers who never have a bad experience and they're like, I love it so much. There are good things that the country does have to offer. And even though there were so many terrible experiences, there were so many things about the history and the culture, like the first bank. I was in Florence. The first bank was started in Florence. So, the concept of going bankrupt, bancarrota, things like that, like things really just that were so fascinating to me that I had to learn more about not just the history of this country, but others. So being broke, I was in a perfect situation to see other countries. So while I was there, I was able to go to Spain. I was able to go to Manchester, which was an accident. I was trying to go to London, didn't read the airport code, went to Manchester. I was able to go to Barcelona. I was able to go to Paris. For the first time in my life, I'm going to these cities, these major cities that I actually, first of all, just never really imagined I would ever see. And now I'm an 2-hour plane ride away from them. So when I had opportunities, I was going. And it felt great. And I was a solo traveler, so I also started my whole solo travel thing. The reason why I was a solo traveler is, again, because I was poor. So I didn't really have no money. So when my rich NYU friends were taking more extravagant trips that cost hundreds, I was like, Ryanair costs $20. This hostel costs about $45 for 3-4 days. So that's where I'm going to be. And so I was able to have these experiences. I met some really great people in Barcelona that actually happened to be living in Florence. I will say that they actually changed my entire Florence experience, meeting these people. Because I no longer had to mess with those rich people I could not relate to. I didn't really have to hang out with them anymore. I could hang out with these cool people that were just like so nice. They were there for like art school. And now I had a whole new group of friends. They got it. They actually understood the racism that I was experiencing. They weren't Black, they weren't people of color, but they just understood it more. I just had a much better time hanging out with them, and they really just changed the rest of the trip for me, just having them. I was actually with them on my last night in Florence, and they had invited me to a dinner with some Italian folks that they met, and that was the first time I had met kind Italians in that country. And it was like, wow, why didn't I meet y'all like months ago? And so it was great. And then I was supposed to go meet up with some friends at a bar. And so I had to leave them. And it was while I was trying to find this bar, I had used up all the minutes on the phone. You know, when you used to do the pay-as-you-go phones when you traveled. So I had used up all my minutes because it was my last day. So I was like, oh, I'll just ask people for directions. I speak Italian at this point. Like I can say dove il bar or whatever, you know. I'm walking around, I'm asking people for directions. They're turning their nose up at me. And I remember distinctly asking one couple for directions. Just for background, I'm like wearing like an oversized sweater, a skull cap. I have my like cat eye glasses on. I'm saying this to say I do not look like a sex worker walking the street, because people have mentioned that that's what it seemed like they thought I was when I was going up to them. I remember that's something that the editor mentioned when I was at the New York Times writing that essay. She was like, how are you dressed? Because they're treating you like you might have been a sex worker or something. And so I realized, oh, it's probably important to mention, I'm just wearing an oversized sweater and a skull cap. And I swear that sweater was like bad luck in Italy, because every time I wore it, I felt like something, because I was wearing it too when that woman screamed at me on the street. I'm like, this sweater is like bad luck. And so I go up to this couple and I say, excuse me, where is the bar? I say it in Italian. And then the guy grabs his girlfriend or whoever she is, he said he's with, and pulls her behind him, like defensively, as if I was going to do something to her. And is like, no, we don't know. No. And I was like, wow, did that just happen? Did you really just treat me like I was some gang member on the street who was about to mug you? Is that really how you just treat? And so that was it. The night was done for me. I said, fuck that bar. I'm going home. I was like, I know that direction. And that was it. I went home, went to bed, woke up next day, airport. That's it.
So now looking back over a decade since that happened, what lessons did you take from that experience? How did that shape your travel lens moving forward and lead to the content that you create today?
For one, it taught me what racism looked like. It taught me what racism, what microaggressions, what it truly looked like. It opened my eyes. And once your eyes open, that's it. You can't shut them. And that's why there's been an attack on the concept of the word woke. Because once you have been awakened, you are awake. That's it. And you see everything for what it is. Once the veil, I'm going to say veil again. Once the veil had been lifted, you see everything for what it is. And so it didn't just change how I moved whenever I traveled. It also changed how I moved in the United States. I just became much more aware to things that were always happening to me, but I didn't register it or couldn't put a name to what was happening to me. It also made me hyper aware of the fact that so many of the travel narratives that we are fed, so many of the travel narratives that we see on TV and the stories that we hear come from that of a white lens. And that is not indicative of a whole picture. Because when white people travel, they travel with a huge amount of positive stereotype, to be honest, when white people travel. Because of colonization, things like Eurocentric ideals are prized. Eurocentric beauty standards are prized. White people, because of how just things have shaken out, people tend to put white people more so on a pedestal than others in certain places. So, I'm saying this because, yes, Italy is a predominantly white country, but I'm talking about countries like in Asia, too, in India, things like that.
And Africa. This is actually a really important thing, right? I've spent probably about 2.5 years on the continent, and I've had discussions with other white travelers because it's interesting because a lot of white people have never in their life been in an all black space where they're the only white person. Like a lot of white people have never experienced that. And there are ways to go to the continent also where you don't experience that. But assuming that you do go to sub-Saharan Africa and you do experience times when you are the only white person in an all black space, I've had other conversations with white travelers where they might say something like, oh, this is the first time I've experienced this. Now I have a greater appreciation or understanding of how black folks must feel in the United States or in some other majority white space. And I always say to them that the main difference there is that white privilege is maintained by you even when you are in an all black space. So for example, I can be in a city like Lagos, Nigeria, where I lived in Lagos for like a month, amazing city. And I saw pretty close to zero white folks the entire month that I was there. However, when I would go to a restaurant or something like that, I would often be treated better than the local black folks that are also going to that restaurant. Furthermore, I do try to stay away from the Nigerian police in general. I try to stay away from all police in general. However, I am not concerned that I'm going to be murdered by the police and so on and so forth. So there's all these different ways where white privilege travels with you, even when you are a numerical minority in certain situations. In the same way that anti-Blackness is globally ubiquitous, white privilege is also globally ubiquitous. And I think it's important for white travelers to be aware of that. So I think it's good to go to spend time in sub-Saharan Africa and put yourself in all black spaces and have those experiences, but just be aware of these dynamics that are also going along with it.
Wow. You are the first white person that I've heard articulate this in this way. And this is something I've been thinking about all the time, and I'm always trying to get people to understand. because this is something that it comes up a lot within the comments, especially in my videos where I talk about different, I give my reviews about different cities and things like that. People often say, well, why don't you just go to Africa? You spend all this time in all these white countries. You could just go to Africa where this won't happen, or like the Caribbean or wherever. And I'm like, I know of Jamaican people who talk about going back to Jamaica and watching white people get served before them. Just because you're in a predominantly Black space does not mean it was not touched by colonialism. It was not touched by white supremacy. And you can see that in the colorism that you can still see in parts of Africa. You can still see that in the way that people treat other Black people. As you said that you witnessed yourself, you were being served before others. The best, or what should I say, the most powerful tool, perhaps, within the world of white supremacy is convincing each minority community that white people are even better than them. So people will look at other Black people and even have their own internalized anti-Blackness within that. And I also always often tell people, there's also anti-Black American sentiment, because when it comes to this perceived hierarchy within white supremacy, there's always this desire to be as close to whiteness as you can. So even within Blackness, you start having different subgroups. Well, I'm Caribbean, I'm African, this is a Black American. And then you go to Africa and you might experience some anti-Black American sentiment, which you've probably heard online, the quote unquote so-called this diaspora wars that go on with very loudly within the larger Black community on the internet. Not to say other cultures don't have diaspora wars, we probably just don't hear about it as much. But then, so then you have, even within that, I go there as a Black American, there could be some anti-Black American sentiment that I experienced there as a person who, as I mentioned, I'm a first generation American. I have heard firsthand the things that people from the Caribbean and other places say about Black Americans. I know what is being said. So I know no one can tell me, oh, that's just the internet. I know what people think. And I am a Black person who was raised in America. When I go to these places, I'm Black American. No one cares about where my family is from. And so that's another layer. So I always tell people, people who are just just go to Africa. Obviously, I would love, first of all, to go to West Africa and experience that, period. Let's say that. I want to go. I want to experience it. I want to go to Deti December. I want to be there, okay? I want to be there, okay? But at the same time, I'm not going there to escape anti-Blackness or racism. I went to Colombia and I went to Cali. One of the Blackest countries is Colombia. One of the Blackest cities is Cali. And that was the first time I had experienced racism in Colombia was in Cali at a restaurant owned by Black people. I wouldn't be going to these places to escape any sort of racism. I don't want people to be under this impression that that's what's going to happen.
Well, let's talk about Colombia, because you led into it. It is one of your favorite countries, I know. It is also one of my favorite countries. So let's talk about Colombia. You've spent time in different parts of Colombia, as have I. You have love for Cali, as do I. You have actually been to the Petronio Alvarez Festival in Cali, which I have not been to, and I want to hear about from you. So maybe just start talking a little bit about Colombia. What for you makes it special? What do you love about Colombia? And then would love to hear about your Cali experience, your positive Cali experience in particular.
When I first went to Colombia, that was in 2019, Cartagena, that was my first time in all of my travels where I just felt so welcomed. And I don't know how to explain it, because like I said, I've been to the Caribbean, so it's not necessarily about it being majority Black or having a large Black population, but it was the first time that I actually felt like the people wanted me there. I felt so appreciated as a Black woman. So if you've been to Cartagena, there's a district called Getsemani. You go to Getsemani and all you see are Black women depicted in the art everywhere. And that was the first time I had been traveling someplace and saw that. And I was like, what? So you see me as the standard of beauty here. And rather than Eurocentric ideals of beauty, and not just light skin, curly hair, you see kinky hair, head wrap, locks, dark skin, Black women as your standard of beauty. That's what you see as beautiful. That's what you're painting in your art. I bought art for the first time, and I'm not really an art person. This is the first time that art spoke to me. I later found out he stole that art. But anyway, hey, I bought my first piece of art there. That's none of my business. I bought my first piece of art there, and I talked to the painter who stole it. And I said, why are there so many Black women in the art, like, what is the reason? He said in Spanish, he was like, Black women are the style, like the fashion. I was like, whoa. That just, to me, was beautiful. To me, it was just such a profound statement. And so that was the moment I fell in love with Colombia, in Cartagena. That was the first time I felt embraced, I felt welcomed, and then I was just like, I have to go back.
So when you went back, where did you go and what was that experience like?
So then I went back to Medellin because I was trying to find a place that I could stay for an extended period of time. I went to language immersion to practice my Spanish. So I am a 20-year Spanish learner. I almost said practitioner, and that makes it sound real like, I don't know, like real witchcrafty. I'm a 20-year Spanish language learner. I really started getting into the language beyond a basic level 3 years ago. I should say, like around 2022, I wanted to do some immersion within Medellin. And this was an amazing experience. So Medellin is in Antioquia and it's not necessarily the blackest area, but the feeling that I had in Cartagena was the exact same feeling I had in Medellin. Nothing had changed, even though I wasn't seeing as many Black people around me. Nobody was staring at me. I didn't have to feel uncomfortable. That's also the main thing about Colombia. No one's being weird toward me. No one was ignoring me in restaurants. I just felt really great. And then the great thing also is that there's a large community of Black travelers and locals and immigrants in Colombia, in all the different cities. There are like WhatsApp groups. You can find them on Facebook. And so I got connected with one in Medellin. I'm not quite sure how, maybe through Facebook or something. But I got mixed in with that group and I just had an amazing time. I had instant friends. And I'm going to all these great group meetups and stuff like that. And I just felt like a Colombian. I felt like I was living there. I was like, I'm ready to sign the papers. Let me be here. Let me be a Colombiana. So that was like just solidified for me, like, okay, Colombia is my country.
So I feel like a lot of people go to Medellin and I feel like a lot of people go to Cartagena. I feel like fewer people go to Cali. I was in Cali for about a month in 2022 and absolutely fell in love with this city. I have been talking about it. Tell me about your experience in Cali and tell me about this festival because I haven't been to it.
So the reason why I don't feel like a lot of people go to Cali is I was scared as shit to go to Cali. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was scared. I was so scared. Oh my gosh. Cali and Bogota. Because if you get robbed, it's Cali or Bogota. And from what I understand, if somebody gonna steal something from you, if you're gonna get scopolamine, whatever that thing is, it's gonna be Cali or Bogota. So I was scared as shit, mind you. That's why I put it around the Petronio Alvarez Festival. So it's like I have a place to be. Like I have something to do. I'm not wandering too idle. No, I'm going for this. I knew on my first day, I go to, I think it was San Antonio, was the area. I went to a restaurant. They had to lock the doors. They was locking us in and locking us out. I was like, where am I? What the heck? This like, oh my God. I was like, not they gotta lock the doors to keep people in and out. I think I posted on Instagram. I was like, Cali got 7 days to prove to me why I need to be here because this is not it. This is not it. I was ready to be like, let me just be in my hotel, go to one night of this festival and go right on home because locking doors is wild. Thankfully, that was my only questionable night. That was my only questionable night in Cali. Everything else was amazing. I went to the festival. Because I was hypervigilant, I had my theft-proof bag on. I was holding my phone for dear life. Because Cali is Cali. No dar papaya. We understand how Colombia is. You know what I'm saying? Like, we understand that you just have to be careful, blah, 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 but you can have a great time. So I was just really careful as I was maneuvering the streets and stuff like that. But then also, I'll say, I'm Black. Sometimes I feel like ain't nobody trying to steal from me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm like, they probably like, she ain't got no money. Her phone paid for the cracks. Like, and that's the times that I'm okay with leaning into a little bit of a stereotype. I'm like, you know what? If the stereotype don't save me and my phone, if the racism gonna save me and my phone, then so be it. You don't want to kidnap me. I ain't got no money. You right. You don't want to kidnap me. My family ain't got no money. You right. So sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, I was being a little risky because I was like, I'm Black. I know I've actually made a couple videos referencing that. Like when I was in Guatemala, people often ask, like, are you afraid of getting robbed? And I'm like, there's that sound on TikTok that's like, you do know that I'm Black, right? You do know that I'm Black, right? You do know that I'm Black, right? So that's kind of the mindset I had a few times. But yeah, so I had an amazing, amazing, amazing time in Cali. Again, connected with the community of locals, travelers, immigrants. And I had an amazing friend/tour guide that had my back the entire time. She's from Cali. She hosts tours in Cali and Medellin. And I call her the president, la presidente. I call her la presidente of Colombia. She's that girl. When you know her, you're good. She's the person to know, especially as a Black traveler. She's the person to know in Colombia. And so she made sure I had a great time, felt comfortable and all of that. And so, yeah, the Petronio Alvarez Festival was like seeing that much of an embrace of Blackness, Afro culture. Obviously, the main focus is Afro-Colombian culture, but then it extends to like Afro-Latinidad. And then I've heard that they've even had bands from like Louisiana come in. So it's like just Black diasporic culture in general. People call it a big family reunion, and it feels a lot like that. Even though it was my first time, it still felt like a big old family reunion. I know none of them dances. I know none of them songs. I got that conversational Spanish down, but there were certain accents I haven't got to that level yet. And then you singing and now you got melody with it. It was a little hard. So I didn't really know what they were saying all the time, but I was into it. I was feeling it. And the food is also really great there. And it just felt like, it was like the best place to be Black. Like, it's just, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I haven't been to Italy December yet, so I'm sure that's great too. But Petronio Alvarez, at least on this side of the world, felt like best place to be Black. And I've been to like the Afro-Punk Festival, but that got very, we'll say, gentrified real fast. So it kind of lost what it once was in certain ways. But the Petronio Alvarez Festival was just, you have to go. You just have to experience it for yourself.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited for you to go to Italy December. I was there in 2022, and that was the year that Burna Boy headlined it, and it was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, in terms of what you're talking about, it was really incredible because it was, probably I would say maybe half the people there are Ghanaian local folks, but at least half the people that are there are from the diaspora from all over the world. Black folks from the US, from London, from South Africa, from Nigeria, from all over the place. And what's amazing is that the DJs at these parties know exactly who is in the crowd. So they'll play like a hip hop song from Atlanta and they will shout out Atlanta and Atlanta will go wild, but then they'll play like a song from South Africa and they'll shout out Johannesburg and Johannesburg will go wild. And then they'll play a song from Lagos and shout out Nigeria and the Nigerians will go wild. And it is really quite an amazing experience in terms of just seeing the African diaspora from around the world just converge in one place. And then, it's just like the parties are just absolutely incredible because you have like the festival and you have the performances and all the Afrobeat artists and everybody that's there. And that goes till 2 or 3. But then you have the after parties that go from 3 till 7. And then you have the day parties that go from 7 till, it's around the clock. So it's like whatever hours you keep, you can do that at Italy December and you can go to whichever things you're awake for at that time. And that can be you, but it's a really special experience. It was interesting too, because the first time I went to Ghana, I went in the summertime, in like the June, July time, which is very much the not touristy season. And I was just blown away by Accra, like just in general as a city. I was there and I was at they have a Sunday party on Labadi Beach in Accra. And I was at that and DJs just start setting up, lining the beach, just different DJs all the way down the beach. And then as the sun starts to set, the DJs are all playing and then people just start showing up. There was probably 5,000 people at this outdoor party on Labadi Beach on a Sunday. This is not a festival. This is just a Sunday. And this is all local Ghanaian folks. And I'm there and my mind is like blown. And the people I was with, I had a Ghanaian friend of mine who was there with me. And these folks were like, yo, you got to come back in December. I was like, what? I was like, how can it possibly be more lit than this? And they're like, just trust me, come back in December. I was like, okay. So then a couple of years later, I went back and that was 2022. I went for Italy December. And sure enough, it was really something to behold. So I hope that you get there eventually. It's a super special experience. But while we're talking about the continent, let me ask you about your experience in Morocco. That is another country I've been to multiple times. I've probably spent about a month or so there and been to different cities. But what was your experience like in Morocco?
So I was in Morocco in 2019. First of all, I'm really happy about this deal. I first flew to Spain for like $230 and then flew to Morocco for $60. And I was like, oh, perfect. Because I'm about a deal. How many places can I hit for like the least amount of money while I'm over here? So I went to Morocco for Marrakech specifically for about 2 to 3 days. And that experience was kind of my first time being immersed within Arab culture. For the first time, like I'd never gone to a country, a Muslim country at that, or, you know, any country with a large Arab influence like that. So that was very new for me. And when I was driving down the street, when I walked through the streets to get to my hotel, I was like, am I in the Bible? It's real biblical, like real, you know, 2000 BCE for a real fucking time. But I loved it. It was just felt, wow, that sort of feeling. The Riyadh that I stayed in, the Riyadh turquoise, oh my gosh, it was also just beautiful. I was in there like, wow, I feel like I'm in a genie's bottle. It was just beautiful. It smells like heaven. Like everything was just like divine. The incense, like that's, like I've never been in a place that smelled so good. Just the city, because there's incense everywhere and the city smells amazing. So, you know, there's like that violet, that gardenia. They put me on the orange blossom. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I had ever smelled orange blossom until I went into Marrakech. And then now I got an orange blossom perfume that I use regularly. I had to get some potpourri. I bought orange blossom essential oil. And so that was a really wonderful experience. And it was a great way for me to understand how to move about in that sort of culture, especially as a woman, because I was solo, right? So I was a little nervous going solo female traveler, but I felt very safe. I did take one risk one time when I was like leaving. I went to a tour and I had to leave early because I had to catch my flight. And so I just got in a car with, I don't even know if he worked there. I just got in a car with somebody and he was driving me to my Riyadh, but he could have driven me anywhere. I don't know. I don't live here. I don't know what the turns he's supposed to make. And for the life of me, I could not keep my eyes open. I was like so tired. You know, like we're winding, you know, it's hard enough you're in the back seat. You want to fall asleep. And I was asleep. I was like, wow, for the life of me, I cannot keep my eyes open. This man could take me anywhere. Dear Lord, don't let him. Like, please let him take me to where he's supposed to take me. And he did. I'm here. Nothing went wrong. You know, that was a little bit of a risk. Did not know that man at all. Didn't even know his name. And then I gave him a little tip afterward. But yeah, one thing I did notice about the culture of, I don't know if it's just that city or Morocco in general, was the very aggressive tipping culture. There. Very aggressive tipping culture in Marrakech. And I wish I had known about that. Because like you can't take a picture of someone's stand without offering a tip. They are not, try to do that. I remember there was like a snake farmer. He was doing his performance in the middle of a whatever circle. When he was done, he went to like everybody in the crowd and was demanding payment from everybody. I was still living in New York at the time. You know, in New York, you just walk away. You're like, all right, that was cool. Showtime. All right, that's over now. And you walk away. He was not having that. So thankfully, I tried and failed to take a photo. I had come at the tail end and I was like fumbling. And I'm like, where's the app? You know, trying to, so I didn't end up actually taking a photo. So when he came to me, I kept telling him I didn't take a photo. I didn't take a photo. And so I had to like show him my camera roll before he would leave me alone. And I was like, oh, y'all are not playing here. So that's like one thing I realized. And then also they be hustling too. Like I got hustled for some henna and I wish I knew about that before I got there. Because this woman, she talked to me and she asked me if I wanted henna. I said no. Then she just starts having a conversation. I'm like, okay, this is nice. We're bonding. She goes, you know what? For you, I'll do it. She's like, give me your hand. I'll do it for you. And I hear, I'll do it for you. So I heard, I'd do it for free. So then I hand her my hand and she does the whole henna. And then in the end, she goes, $20. And I was like, she's just smiling, like looking at me. And I'm like, well, I can't not pay her because then I look like I'm stealing. And I don't know how they deal with people who be stealing in here. So I can't just look like I'm stealing from this old woman. So I gave her my money and then I was very upset. And then I had henna on my hand that I did not want. And I'm walking through the bazaars with a wet ass hand with henna. And I'm like trying like not to get it on things. And I definitely got it on somebody something. And I was like, oh, who's going to charge me $7,500 now act like it's made of gold. And now I'll pay my whole paycheck or something. But he was good about it. He was like annoyed and then let me go. And so, yeah, that was kind of my marriage experience in a nutshell.
Well, I also want to ask you, Nicole, about some places that you have been to that I have not yet been to. One of them that's very high on my list is Guatemala. Can you share a little bit about your experience in Guatemala?
Guatemala, yes. The thing about Guatemala is if you're going to Antigua, you got to be a hiker. And I am not. Like, it's a great place if you love to hike, like mountain hike, not just through the woods. Because that's what people do, that they go hike up the volcanoes. Those are like bucket list things for people, like active volcanoes. I did do an ATV up the Kaya volcano, and that was a really awesome experience. The food is also really great. The people were so kind. That was another experience for me where I was like, I feel really comfortable here, because oftentimes when I go to places where they don't have a large Black population or there aren't a lot of Black people, I get a lot of weird photo requests and stares and things like that. That happens a lot in Mexico. But in this particular situation, like when I was there for I want to say I was there for like 5 to 7 days, that didn't happen at all. People were really chill. And so that's why, to me, it was a really good experience for that, hands down. And also, if you're trying to practice your Spanish, the Guatemalan accent is very, at least easy to understand, at least in my opinion, because I think some of the easiest accents to understand are the Mexican and Colombian accent, and then Guatemala is definitely up there.
All right. So I now have to ask you about your trip to the Arctic Circle. I have been going through your content on this and I was like, yo, that's crazy. I have not been there. In just this past December, for my very first time, I did go to Helsinki, Finland, but it was only for a couple of days. I was actually doing a trip with my sister. So my sister is single and in her 40s and loves to travel. So she and I try to meet somewhere and do like a brother-sister trip each year somewhere. And so this year we did the Baltic region. And so we met in Vilnius, Lithuania, and then we went to Riga, Latvia, and then we went to Tallinn, Estonia, and then we took the boat from Tallinn across the water to Helsinki, Finland, and spent a couple of days in Helsinki. And it was a great time of year. We did the Christmas markets and all of that kind of stuff. I have not been up to the Arctic Circle. And I just want you to share this trip for people because I was absolutely inspired by your content. So start from wherever you like, but definitely take us through and share some of the highlights of your experience in the Arctic Circle in Lapland, Finland.
So this whole trip was inspired by the fact that so many people in the northeastern United States in November got to see the Northern Lights, and Nicole in Orlando, Florida did not. And I was so upset that I was like, hold up. I'm not going to just go to Maine or whatever to see some Northern Lights. I'm going to go all the way to the Arctic Circle. Y'all not about to see the Northern Lights without me. Nicole will see these lights and I'm going to do it better. I'm not lying to you. That was exactly my mindset. I promise you. It just so happens that my birthday is also in January. So I was like, I'm going to do a birthday trip. And so I found a friend who was able to go with me, and we went to Stockholm, Sweden first. And from Stockholm, Sweden, we went to Rovaniemi, Finland. So that's in the Lapland area of Finland in the Arctic Circle. I think that's the outermost city. The city right as you get to the Arctic Circle is Rovaniemi. When we get there, we're told they were in Celsius. So we're told it's negative 22 degrees Celsius. I have never in all my days experienced any type of cold such that of negative 22 degrees Celsius. So I didn't really know what to expect. Mind you, I was buying so much stuff prior to this trip. But the first excursion that we had was pretty much like right after we landed. And it was a Northern Lights trip. Basically, literally just take you out to some open field to go look at the Northern Lights. So I think it's negative 16 degrees Fahrenheit. So very cold. We go to this place, you get some gear. They give you overalls, they give you shoes, they give you a balaclava if you need it, depending on what you're doing. And I think like scarves and gloves. They ain't work. They might as well have given me absolutely nothing, and they ain't do nothing for me. I might as well have been naked outside. And I had my own clothes. You're supposed to put all this on over your clothes that you already have on. I already have on all the layers. Y'all lied to me who gave me these lists. I got the silk layers, the merino layers, the wool, everything. And I went outside and I was the coldest I have ever been in my life. They take us on what's called a snow train, and they take you out to, I think it's either a frozen swamp or a frozen lake. Fun fact, the indigenous name for Finland is Suomi, and Suomi means swamp because Finland has a bunch of swamps. It's a very swampy land. So they take us out to basically a field. There are a couple of teepees out, and inside the teepee, there's a fire in one. The fire didn't do nothing. It might as well have been a light bulb. The fire did absolutely nothing. And then there's like some food and hot berry juice. And so you basically sit inside the tent until someone tells you that the northern lights are out. It's a beautiful, clear sky night. We go out. We're just sitting in the tent waiting. We're eating hot dogs and marshmallows, freezing our butts off, only for not a single northern light to be seen. Not a single one. And that's something you have to prepare for if you're going on an Arctic Circle trip, because you could very well be freezing your butt off and see absolutely nothing. That's why you're supposed to book multiple days, because it's basically every other day that you'll see it. So you have to book multiple days of experiences to go out. So that first day was the worst day because it was just so awful and cold, and we all just ended up going back. It felt like a walk of shame. And I was pretty much over it. It was to the point where I had to call my mom and I said, Mom, you got to pray for me, because if every night is like this, I'm going to regret this entire decision. And then God must have heard my prayers, because every other day after that was between 20 and 40 degrees. The Finns themselves were like, man, because it was so hot. And I was like, thank the Lord. Because this was not me thanking God for a 20-degree day. But I'm like, I need 20 degrees. It actually did get so warm at one point. We were able to like walk outside without jackets on. But that's also like relative. It was like 40 degrees. But when you were in -16, 40 degrees, it feels like summer. So the next day we did dog sledding on a much warmer day. And that turned around everything. The dogs were adorable. I'm like, this was just a really nice experience to be able to dog sled in the Arctic sunrise. They're very energetic dogs, huskies. They just have a lot of energy. They're made for the snow. And this is basically what these dogs do. So that was a great experience. The day after that, we did snowmobiling. We took these snowmobiles out to another frozen swamp. And for the first time in my life, I finally saw the northern lights. They were so bright, so vibrant. You could see it with the naked eye. And it's something that just has to be experienced, because photos don't do it justice. Like, photos truly don't do it justice. So they slowly start peeking out. And then it just went all the way across the sky, just clear across the sky, this beautiful green aurora. And it was so bright, you could also catch it on video, because usually you can't catch it on video. Usually you need the photographs so you can let in as much light as you can, but I was able to capture it on video. It was grainy, but it was there. And man, it was just, I was like, this is what I came for.
You got to tell people also about the Arctic Snow Hotel. For people that have never heard of this, they don't know anything about this, explain what this is and what it was like.
Yes. So the Arctic Snow Hotel, I did the day before my birthday. So we go out to this hotel. It is exactly the way it sounds. A hotel made of snow. Like, actually, they make molds and they pack it with snow, and then the snow hardens, and this whole hotel is made of snow. And then the beds are made of ice, and they have so many different rooms, and each room is completely different, designed completely differently, because there are actual snow carvings in the walls. And so each room looks very different. It's still beds on ice. I don't know how comfortable they would actually be in practice, to lay on these hard beds. I don't know, because you can rent those rooms, or you can book stays in those rooms, but they're beautiful to look at. I would not book the stay in those rooms, but they are beautiful to look at. There's also an ice chapel. When you walk in, it does feel like the place Anna or Elsa would have been married, right? You walk through, and there are ice benches covered in moose skin pelts, I guess, or reindeer skin pelts. And then ice sculptures in the background at the very front where you would stand as you're getting married and you're reading your vows. And it's rather small, but they did a lot with the space in terms of the decoration and all of that. So if you're really into that sort of vibe, like, that would be so beautiful. They even have a dining area made completely out of ice, which I don't know how practical that is, just because your food get cold really fast, but like, everything's made of ice. And I think they serve one of their dishes on an ice plate. It is a work of art. It is definitely a work of art. And so I was in awe when I saw that. Then they have a sauna experience where you can be inside of a snow sauna, which is literally a sauna made of snow, which is a very Finnish way to do a sauna. And then they have like, you throw water on the hot stones and the steam emits, and it's just, it's so beautiful. There are obviously indoor activities as well, so you can be warm. There is a restaurant inside. I think there might be one or two, and that's where I ate. It's also an ice bar inside the hotel, completely made of ice. The shot glasses are made of ice, and you're supposed to take a shot, and when you're done, you throw it at the wall. Like, that's the tradition. And for those who are not trying to sleep on a bed made of ice, they have glass igloos. And that is what was really cool to me. So we stayed in a glass igloo. Now, mind you, all of this was part of like the package that we paid for. So I don't necessarily know how much it cost, but like to do this was like just such a unique and cool experience. And they look like they would be small, but they're relatively spacious for a night or two. There's a whole shower with hot water. And there's an alarm that lets you know when you can see the auroras. Because like the point to it being in a glass igloo is so that you can see the auroras on a good night. And so we didn't necessarily see any. It wasn't a very clear night. I did randomly just snap a photo. Like I just looked up and snapped a photo, and I did get a little glimpse of an aurora. So that was like my first time seeing the aurora. So this must have happened before the snowmobile experience. That was my first time seeing that. And I was like, wow. And that was the day before my birthday. It was so amazing. I had my bottle of wine. I turned up. It was great. And then the next day, that was my actual birthday, was less fun. And so I'm glad that I got to celebrate the day before.
That's so amazing. Well, we are going to link up in the show notes to the video that you have done of this so folks can actually see what this stuff looks like. It is absolutely incredible. All right, we're going to pause here and call that the end of part 1. For direct links to everything we have discussed in this episode, including all of the ways to find, follow, connect with Nicole, and check out her content. All of that is going to be linked up in one place. Just go to themaverickshow.com, go to the show notes for this episode, and there you will find it. And be sure to tune in to the next episode to hear the conclusion of my interview with Nicole Phillip. Good night, everybody.